I'm Marcus, and I'll be talking about salespeople in general from the first chapter of the book. There isn't any one specific job description for salespeople, it always depends on the job. In the job, a salesperson has to play different roles. He has to be a client relationship manager and also an account and team manager. He is responsible for the supply chain logistics and the channel management. Moreover, he has to provide information to his company. There are also different types of salespeople depending on the distribution channel. This can be B2B channels or consumer channels. Another criterion is the working place of the salesman. Field salespeople spend time in the customer's place of business with face-to-face contact, whereas inside salespeople work at their employer's location and communicate with computer or telephone. The success of a salesperson depends on several characteristics. He has to be self-motivated, confident and optimistic. In addition to that, he should be flexible and creative with an emotional intelligence about the customer's emotions and in controlling his own emotions. Analytical and communication skills are also an advantage. In this context, a common question is if salespeople are born or made. In my opinion, salespeople are made because most of the skills can be learned in training programs, for example. To be a salesperson offers different kinds of rewards. First, you are independent and self-responsible, and then the financial rewards, which are depending on your own success. And last but not least, your job is a good basis for future management opportunities.
Hello, my name is Kayla, and I will be discussing legal and ethical issues covered in Chapter 2.
While many are familiar with ethics, it can be hard to define. This chapter defines it as principles governing the behavior of an individual or group.
By establishing appropriate behavior, one can identify what is right and wrong. Not all ethical perceptions are the same. They can change depending on the industry and country.
In selling, factors like personal goals, social norms, customer goals, company policies, laws, and values of significant others create a personal code of ethics, which inform ethical behavior.
Ethical behavior can hurt your selling potential because it hinders a relationship between buyer and seller. A basic principle to go by is to use persuasion, not manipulation, because the customer must remain free to make a choice. Remember, being unethical can have negative effects, like compromising long-term relationships for short-term gains. Deception, bribe, kickbacks, and backdoor selling are examples of unethical relations with customers.
Deception is deliberately presenting inaccurate information by telling half-truths or withholding information. Bribes are payments made to buyers to influence the purchasing decision. Kickbacks are payments made to buyers based on the amount of orders placed. Backdoor selling is when the salespeople ignore the purchasing agency's policy and contacts people directly involved in the purchasing decision.
It is also important to keep things ethical within a company and in relation to other competitors. Unethical behaviors to avoid in the workplace includes sexual harassment, giving away trade secrets, and approaching other salespeople's potential customers. Unethical behaviors to avoid with competitors include making false claims and sabotage. Laws are also an important factor in ethics. These laws include statutory, administrative, and common law.
As mentioned before, ethics can vary depending on the country.
To resolve these differences when selling internationally, keep in mind cultural relativism, the view that no culture's ethics are superior. Companies in the U.S. must also keep in mind ethical imperialism, the view that ethical standards in one's home country should be applied to one's behavior around the world. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act makes this a legal matter, as it is illegal for U.S. companies to give foreign officials bribes. An amendment makes paying a small sum of money or gifts, also known as lubrication, legal when customary in a culture.
My name is Gabe Gustafson, and I'll be going over the buying process today from Chapter 3. So there's 8 different steps in the buying process when we know we need to make a decision for the organization to make a purchase. So the first step is going to be recognizing that a need or a problem exists. Okay, so something in the organization is causing a problem, and now we know that we need to fix it. So this is the first step in realizing that we need to buy a product or service to fix this issue we're having. So the second step is going to define what type of product is going to help solve this problem for us. And then after that, we're going to develop product specifications, so exact details about the product, what it needs to have included in it for us to be able to solve our problem. The fourth step is searching for a qualified supplier. So we're going to look for who can we buy this from, who's reliable, who's going to get it to us on time, all those kinds of things. The fifth step is acquiring and analyzing all these different proposals that we're going to receive so that we know which one we kind of want to choose from, or that we're most likely to choose from. So then the next step is going to be, again, looking over these proposals and then selecting a supplier to make the purchase from. And then seventh is going to be placing an order and receiving the actual product from our supplier so that we can actually go ahead and use it to solve whatever problem or issue we're having. And then the eighth step is going to be evaluating the product performance. So after we've used it and tested it out and applied it, did it fix our problem? Will we use it again? All those different kinds of things. So with the buying process, there's 8 different steps, and there's actually 3 different kinds of organizational buying decisions of when we would use this process. The first one is in a new task buying decision. So this is when we're actually going to buy a product or service for the first time. We've never used it before, but we're going to try it out for the first time. The second type is a straight rebuy. This is when a customer will buy the same product from the exact same supplier that they bought it from in the past because they were happy with the product's performance. And then lastly is a modified rebuy. This is where there's a purchase of a similar product or service in the past, but now we're going to go ahead and make a little bit of a adjustment to it, and because we want to learn a little bit more about all the different options that are available to us. So again, my name is Gabe Gustafson, and that was the buying process for Chapter 3.
Hi, I'm Trey Bagley. I'm going to be covering active listening from Chapter 4. Many salespeople believe effective communication is achieved by talking a lot. These inexperienced salespeople often go into a selling situation thinking they have to out-talk the prospect. This is often done because the salesperson wants to tell the prospect everything they know. A good rule of thumb for dividing the time spent talking appropriately in a sales pitch is the 80-20 rule. Salespeople should listen 80% of the time and talk no more than 20% of the time. Now, I would like to know a few key characteristics of active listening that the textbook outlines. The first characteristic of active listening is to put yourself in the speaker's place. Doing this will help you recognize how the prospect might be feeling. And knowing how the prospect is feeling can help you gauge your response and the effectiveness of your sales pitch. The second characteristic of active listening is reading the speaker's body language carefully. This is so important because words are only responsible for 40% of the information people acquire in face-to-face communication. Voice characters account for 10% of the message received, and the remaining 50% comes from nonverbal communication. The third and final characteristic of active listening is avoiding all distractions. These distractions may include checking an email, texting, or even looking out the window. Allowing yourself to get distracted can make you look uninterested and can result in missing important information from your prospective client. Active listeners think while they listen. They attempt to draw out as much information as possible. Gestures can encourage a person to continue talking. Head nodding, eye contact, and phrases like, "Oh, I see," and "Yeah, that's really interesting," all demonstrate an interest. With all this in mind, here are 5 final suggestions for being a successful active listener. Number 1, repeat or rephrase information for clarification and reassurance. Number 2, summarize the conversation when it feels necessary. Number 3, pay attention to nonverbals and react accordingly. Avoiding all distractions can help with this. Number 4, use gestures to encourage the prospect to continue talking. And finally, suggestion number 5, remember the 80-20 rule. Effective communication is not achieved by talking as much as possible. It is impossible to determine your prospect's needs if you're monopolizing the entire conversation. Well, that is active listening in a nutshell. I highly encourage all of you to complete the questionnaire on page 102 of our textbook to rate your active listening skills. This is a skill that all of us will benefit from having mastered in our careers out of college. And with that, thank you for listening.
In this video, I will be covering adaptive selling and relationship building from Chapter 5. The main points I will be focusing on is what is adaptive selling, why is it important for salespeople to practice adaptive selling, how can salespeople, or why, what kind of knowledge do salespeople need to practice adaptive selling, how can they acquire this knowledge, and how can salespeople adapt their selling, sales strategies, presentations, and social styles to various situations. So first, adaptive selling is reacting to different sales situations by changing your sales behavior and having the ability to tailor your message to individual customers and make on-the-spot adjustments. So this is basically a customized presentation. Customized presentation is knowing your customer needs and learning your customer needs and then making a presentation based on their needs. and also being able to manipulate or change things during the presentation, which is on the spot, having on the spot adjustments during the presentation to meet their needs or meet their needs you may not have known before the presentation. So it is important to practice adaptive selling because each buyer and as well as a salesperson have different social styles. So knowing your buyer's social style and needs enables you to gain their trust and hopefully they will buy your product. The knowledge needed to practice adaptive selling is knowing your product very well and also knowing the company you work for very well. That allows you to focus on the customer individually and learning their needs and also the sales situation. So that gives you confidence and it allows you to build self-confidence and gain the buyer's trust, most importantly, and satisfy customer needs. So that will ultimately lead to a greater performance. Ways to acquire this knowledge is using feedback from sales managers in the form of performance feedback or diagnostic feedback. Or performance feedback is asking yourself after the sales situation, did you achieve the goals that you planned before the sales presentation? And then a diagnostic feedback is discussing with a sales manager why you didn't achieve the goals that you set out before the presentation, and basically learning from your mistakes. And another way to acquire knowledge is having a knowledge management system. So this is basically like a customer database where you keep the customer needs and also it constantly updates the customer needs, so that way you are able to form a sales strategy based on their current needs. So ways salespeople can adapt their sales presentation and social style to various situations are using the social style matrix that defines 4 customer categories based on their assertiveness and responsiveness in the sales interaction. So identifying the customer's social style allows you to style flex, which is mirroring the customer's social style, so that way you are able to relate to them and help gain their trust, and that will ultimately allow you to be more effective.
Hi everyone, my name is Quade Zupko, and I will be doing Chapter 6, Prospecting with Brandon. I'll be covering the importance of prospecting, characteristics of a good prospect, and how and where to obtain prospects. So the definition of prospecting, it's a process of locating potential customers for a product or service. The importance of prospecting. Salespeople must find new customers to replace those who switch to competitors, go bankrupt, or decide to move on. Companies must actively keep prospecting for new customers because it may take up to 100 contacts to convert one customer. So what are characteristics of a good prospect? Prospecting starts with finding leads. The salesperson must then qualify this lead to make sure they're a good candidate for a sale. If they are, they become a prospect, and from those prospects, customers are determined. This book refers to this process as a sales funnel. These are some good questions to ask when trying to pinpoint good prospects. Does a want or need exist? Does the lead have the ability to pay? Does the lead have the authority to pay? Can the lead be approached favorably? And is the lead eligible to buy? And finally, I want to touch on how and where to obtain prospects. Prospecting sources and methods vary for different types of selling. Satisfied customers are the most effective sources for leads. Some other methods are the endless chain method and networking. These methods are also built off relationships. Otherwise, some other important ways to get prospects are social media, the internet, direct mail, databases, cold calling, spotters, and many more. Prospecting will always be an important topic in business. This is how companies obtain new customers and continue operating. This is very important knowledge to myself and the rest of the business world to not only get customers, but to get good customers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brandon, and I'll be covering some key points about prospecting from Chapter 6. In order to use time more wisely and make prospecting a bit easier, salespeople can use 2 different systems. These are the lead qualification and lead management systems. The lead qualification system is a process developed by salespeople to qualify their leads. The system assigns points to a prospect, giving the salesperson more insight into the lead's value. Now, the lead management system is where the salesperson analyzes the value of each lead carefully. This means evaluating the prospect's expected return on investment and expected customer lifetime. With the help of technology, using these systems helps salespeople become more effective and efficient in the prospecting process. My next point is how salespeople can overcome being hesitant to prospect. We stereotype salespeople as being bold, confident, and outgoing, but sometimes they struggle with prospecting no matter how well trained they are or how much they believe in their product. Sometimes salespeople are thinking about worst-case scenarios, are intimidated, or just have a need to make excuses and blame others. To overcome this, salespeople should identify their excuses, practice role-playing, stop negative self-evaluation, and learn some relaxation and stress-reducing techniques. And lastly, prospecting can help us all out in the future. For example, after graduating, I'm sure many of us will be searching for a job, and we can use sources of job prospects like internships, job fairs, previous and current employers, and of course networking. Now, when you are looking for job leads, you can ask yourself if the job has a need or want you can satisfy. Do you have the skills and experience to bring value to the company? Is the salary within an acceptable range? And lastly, does your contact have the authority to make a hiring decision? Asking yourself these prospecting questions can help you sort through the job leads and make the most of your time to find the best fit for you.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie, and I'm going to be talking about Chapter 7, Planning a Sales Call. First off, why is planning a sales call so important? Proper planning can help a salesperson meet their call objectives. Also, without planning a sales call, a salesperson may cover material that the buyer has no interest in hearing, or they may talk about things that may not even relate to what the buyer is trying to look for. First, you want to gather information about the prospect and the company. This includes getting to know the prospect by finding out his or her interests and possibly what their attitudes may already be towards your company or product. The more information a salesperson has on a prospect, the higher you will be able to meet the prospect needs and develop a long-term relationship. This information can be found through your company's sales portals, secretaries, the internet, and even non-competing salespeople. The most important step in planning a sales call is to set objectives. All objectives should be specific, realistic, and measurable. For example, when at the end of the sales call, you may want to have your buyer sign a deal that says that they are going to buy 100 computers. The salesperson must understand that all buyers set objectives before going to the sales call as well. Finally, after gathering all the information you can, it's time to make an appointment. When doing this, you want to make sure that you have the right people going to be in the meeting, the right time, and the right place.
Hi, I'm Luke, this is Jack, and I'm going to be doing Chapter 8 on the sales call. So I'm going to focus on a few main points for this quick two-minute-ish video. First, I'm going to build rapport with Jack and try to build a strong relationship with him. And then kind of discover what his needs and wants are as a buyer. He is the owner of a roofing company and I'm selling shingles, so I want to understand what he's looking for and relate my product and the features that my product has to the needs and wants that he has as a business owner. And then throughout that process, I'm going to try to build some credibility. Obviously, there's a lot more aspects to making the sales call, but these are the main things I'm going to focus on. So we'll just get started right away. Hey Jack, how's it going?
Hey, good to see you, Luke.
Good to see you too. I appreciate you allowing me to come in and talk to you today. I know
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
a really busy guy, especially this time of the year.
Yeah, I mean, that winter was pretty rough, so we
Yeah.
got kind of a lot of banged up roofs around the town, so we've
Right.
been working all day and all night, but, you know, business is business.
Definitely. I know you're real busy right now, so if you don't mind, we'll just get right into it right away. As
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
talked on the phone, I do have a product that I'd like to talk to you about. We got a new shingles coming out, a new line of shingles that we have to offer. As a company owner, what are some of the things that you look for when you're in the industry of buying shingles?
We definitely want them to be lighter than most, and we also want them to have some durability, so lasting long is very important when we're buying those.
Yeah, so that's one thing that we focus on as a company is light shingles, because that allows you to allows you to have your workers work faster and more efficiently while using less energy. And it's funny you mentioned durability. That's just one thing that we've been kind of doing a survey on recently. We're a company that's been around for 100 years, and we recently surveyed all of southwestern Wisconsin, all the jobs that we've done, and all of our jobs have come back, and I have a report I can show you. Okay. Throughout that video, I just kind of tried to touch on identifying what his needs were, applying my product to his needs, and then building credibility by providing like facts as to why my product can legitimately help him. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Payne DeMaster, and I'm going to be talking about Chapter 9, Strengthening the Presentation. There are 5 characteristics that make a presentation strong. Number 1 is to keep the buyer's attention. Use appropriate communication and visual aids. Number 2, improve the buyer's understanding. Appeal to more than one of their senses to make a stronger case. 3, help the buyer remember what you said. 50% of what people hear, they can't remember, so you want to make sure that your presentation is memorable. 4, offer proof or assertions. Many people lack trust in salespeople, so if you claim something, make sure you can follow up with proof of why it works. 5, you want to create a sense of value. Handle the product in care and make sure it's meaningful to you so that it represents the same way to the customer. Along with the 5 characteristics, there are also several tools you can use to strengthen a presentation. The first are verbal tools. Use pictures and stories. So perhaps use a personal story and use the product as a prop within your story. Paint a clear picture and watch your audience for reactions. Also, use humor. Use a joke that identifies well with your customers. But also be careful not to overdo the humor because you want to make sure that the presentation is serious and that they're taking your product seriously as well. Along with verbal tools, there are many visual tools you can use. Graphics and charts are great for numbers or important information that you may want to display, such as price or the quality of an item. Make sure that there aren't too many numbers and the font is large enough so it doesn't distract the client. Other visual aids are models, samples, GIFs, photos and brochures, photo illustrations, ads, and maps. And one of the most credible sources you can use is testimonials. A recent customer's experience is going to go a lot further than your own experience. Along with visual tools, product demonstrations are also a good tool to use. This is a good way to show how the product may work, but it can also get the customer involved and relieve their doubts that they may have about the product. After a product demonstration may be done, you want to make sure you have a value analysis. Two very popular value analysis are the customer value analysis and the cost-benefit analysis. When thinking about the customer value analysis, you want to show how your product is different from competitors, but it also still meets the needs of the customer. When thinking about how to put this value analysis together, answer these 3 questions in your head. What is important to the prospect? How does the solution create value for this prospect? And how can you demonstrate the capability of this product? A cost-benefit analysis, you want to make sure that the benefits of your product are outweighing the costs. So simply put together a scale that shows how the benefits are outweighing the cost. Other value analysis you can use are a return on investment, a payback period, net present value, or an opportunity cost. It really all depends on who your customer is and what will target them more specifically. Lastly, by understanding how to make a stronger presentation, we all know that there comes a fear of public speaking. So to calm your nerves, you want to know your audience and be knowledgeable about the product that you're selling. Watch for visual cues within your audience and make sure you're listening to all your customers' concerns. Most importantly, prepare and practice for this presentation so you come off as a credible source. By doing all of these tools, you should be able to have a stronger presentation and make a good sale. Thank you.
I'm going to be discussing the first half of Chapter 10. Chapter 10 has to deal with objections, and in this context, objections are defined as a concern or a question that's raised by the buying party. Objections commonly occur on a daily basis and sometimes even several times a day. This can be the most stressful part of the job for salespeople, and salespeople just need to be able to adapt to objections by sincerely answering them, not contradicting themselves, telling the truth, and making sure that they are just being helpful and as counselors to the buying party. Objections commonly occur when setting up a sales call, during the appointment, during the presentation, while trying to obtain commitment from the buyer, and even after the sale has been made. Objections are commonly raised in regard to needs, the product, the source, the price, and the time. An example of an objection related to a need is maybe the buyer says, "I've never done it that way, so why would I want to start now?" An objection related to the product could be something like, "I need more information about your product. I don't understand how to use it." An objection related to the source could be as simple as the buyer saying, "I don't like your company," or even, "I don't like you." An objection related to the price could simply be the buyer stating that they don't have enough money to make the purchase at this point in time. And the last objection related to time could relate to something such as the buyer stating that, "I don't want to do this right now, maybe 3 months down the line," or maybe they just don't have a need for it at this point, but maybe in a year from now. Objections are going to be commonly occurring during the sales job, and salespeople just need to know and learn how to best handle them. And we're going to go over some of the methods and ways to handle objections in the second half of Chapter 10.
Half of Chapter 10 is about the behaviors of successful salespeople and effective response methods that are used to counter objections. The LARC method is a helpful tool for salespeople to follow because it lays out steps for successfully handling objections. The first step is to engage in active listening. The second step is to acknowledge that the buyer does indeed have a worry. The next step is to assess whether or not the objection is really an objection or just an excuse. Then, a response that counters the objection should be carefully explained to the buyer. The final step the seller should take is to confirm that he or she has addressed the prospect's concerns. Along with the LARC method, there are several things that salespeople can do. The first one is to anticipate objections. Understanding that objections are a frequently occurring part of the job will help salespeople better prepare to answer them. Salespeople should also forestall known concerns. This tactic is used to prevent buyers from offering objections by addressing them ahead of time in the sales pitch. Another thing that successful salespeople do is relax and take the time to listen to the buyer's objections without interruption. This ensures that the seller understands the objection fully and shows respect to the buyer. They also evaluate the objection for validity before responding to make sure that the objection of the buyer is a real concern and not just an excuse that is masking another objection. Lastly, successful sellers always tell the truth. Even the smallest lies can ruin long-term relationships and destroy a salesperson's reputation. To combat lies, more time should be spent on gaining knowledge about their products and the products of the competition. When dealing with tough customers, it is especially important to continue with these good behaviors and keep a positive attitude. Sellers must realize that buyers have bad days too, and do their best to appropriately approach difficult situations. When responding to objections, there are several methods that sellers can use, including direct denial, indirect denial, the compensation method, the referral method, the revisit method, the acknowledge method, and even the postpone method. However, before using any of these methods, salespeople need to engage in probing to help clarify the prospect's concerns. They should also utilize the friendly silent questioning stare, which can be used to encourage buyers to more fully elaborate on their objections. After responding to objections, sellers must confirm that they have adequately addressed the buyer's concerns. Salespeople encounter objections every day. By anticipating them and understanding how to appropriately respond to them, salespeople are more likely to overcome them, close the sale, and find a greater amount of enjoyment in their job.
So I'm Jack Slavak, and I'm going to be doing Chapter 11 on obtaining commitment. During this script, we're going to be going over some things such as making sure the deal is closed, looking for positive eye contact, things like that to make sure he's interested, and knowing that the conversation or the sale is going to an end. So I have Luke here, who I'm going to go through the script with. Could we make an appointment for next week, at which time I would come in and do a complete survey of your needs? It shouldn't take more than 3 hours.
No, I don't think I'm quite ready to take that step yet.
There must be some reason why you're hesitating to go ahead now. Do you mind if I ask what it is?
I'm just not convinced that your firm is large enough to handle a customer of our size.
In addition to that, is there any other reason you would not be willing to go ahead?
No.
If I can resolve the issue of our size, would you be able to conduct a survey?
Well, I wouldn't exactly say that.
Then there must be some other reason. Can I ask what it is?
Well, a friend of mine told me that your services and your billing department sends him invoices for material that he didn't want to receive.
In addition to that, is there any other reason for not going ahead now?
No, those are my two concerns.
If I could resolve these issues right now, would you be willing to set up an appointment for a survey?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke.
You're welcome.
So you see, I was trying to be assertive over aggressive there. I kind of asked questions trying to get the answer for why he wasn't willing to do it initially, and I was able to promise that we could commit to what he needed by going around and asking questions that needed his needs and fit ours as well. And that, in a nutshell, is obtaining commitment.
I'll be talking about negotiating from Chapter 12, more specifically, the common types of win-lose tactics and how to respond to them. One you may encounter is the good guy, bad guy routine, which involves one of the buyers wanting an outrageous deal and another buyer comes in and saves the day with a different offer, but still not quite what the seller is looking for. The best defense to this is to stay strong on your position and not let the buyer's tactics fool you. Another kind is lowballing. Here's an example of lowballing from a negotiation.
Here's the signatures you needed.
Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you.
Oh, I forgot to mention that you also have to assume all the shipping insurance expenses.
Here, the seller should say no and remind the buyer a deal has already been made. Nibbling is another type of lowball offer. It asks for a small extra perk or incentive like free shipping or a discount on the first order. These should be handled on a base-to-base case. Next is an emotional outburst, which can be one of the most uncomfortable ways for the buyer to negotiate. Here we will see an example. We will have to raise our prices by 8% this sales quarter.
Oh my! I just don't know how I can keep my doors open with the prices rising these days.
The important thing to do here is recognize the tactics being used and stay firm with what the seller is doing. Try to give strong logistical counter arguments and avoid emotions to ensure the best deal for both parties. Another is budget limitation. This is basically blaming a budget for the inability to accept high prices. The best defense to do this is to do your research on the company's budget maxes if possible, or have other alternatives ready to present. Finally, a buyer might try browbeating you or your employer. Browbeating is an attempt to alter the seller's self-respect or enthusiasm. Bringing up negative things in the news about your company would be an example. A great way to counter browbeating is negotiation jiu-jitsu. Here we'll see an example.
I saw your firm got in trouble with poor working conditions.
Yes, it's unfortunate that happened, and hopefully we won't see it in the future. If you have any ideas to help us in this regard, it'd be greatly appreciated. Now we are discussing price. You can see how the seller didn't act negatively or attack the buyer, ask for advice. This should calm the buyer and allow for conversation to go back to what you're discussing. Overall, you can face a lot of negotiation tactics while working, so it's important to continue adaptive selling behaviors so you can close future sales.
So chapter 13 of our textbook really focuses on building relationships between the consumer and the business. And in every ideal relationship, it should be a win-win situation for both the business and the consumer. And there's different types of these relationships. One of them being a functional relationship. This kind of derives from a product's reliability and durability for the consumer, so they keep coming back to the business and driving business. The other one being a relational partnership. This kind of derives from customer service, that they can always rely on their service and adaptability for any problem they might have. So in both these situations, the consumer is benefiting as well as the business. Now, to get this mutual benefit from a relationship between the consumer and a business, first you must go through the phases of establishing that relationship.
Now, really, there are 4 phases into the partnership process. The first 2 being awareness and exploration. Awareness is really just that prospecting phase that all businesses go through to get their customers. But the second is the exploration phase, and that's kind of that search and find, and also kind of that sifting process where they really kind of determine which prospects are the best for their business.
And the next stage being the expansion phase. This is where both sides, both parties, investigate how this will benefit each of them. And followed by that is the commitment phase, where you actually put in writing, defining this relationship, and deciding how it will benefit both parties.
Now we want to focus on the benefits you get after gaining commitment from between the business and the consumer. And we've got 4 big things that we have for benefits. One being dependability, and that's being able to rely on either side of the party, both the business and the consumer, especially for feedback and good insight. Second is the competence, is just being able to understand how both parties work, both the business and the consumer, what their needs are, what they can offer, and things like that. Thirdly, it's honesty, and that's just being plain, simple, and open about how the entire transaction is going to operate. Lastly, it's likability, and it's just like any other relationship, you gotta like each other for it to work. So that's the last of the stuff that we feel like is the big points of Chapter 13, and that's what we want to share with you today.
Hi, I'm Leah, and I'm going to be talking about Chapter 14, Building Long-Term Relationships. In this chapter, the process follows similar steps that were discussed in Chapter 13, such as awareness, exploration, expansion, and commitment. However, in this chapter, expansion and commitment are emphasized more. In expansion, it's important that salespeople communicate upgrades or expansions of their products in order to help regenerate orders. This can be done by doing full line or cross line selling. Both the salesperson and the customer benefit from long-term relationships because over time, trust is built, making purchase and sales decisions easier. One big part in building successful long-term relationships is by ensuring customer satisfaction. It's important that customers are satisfied with the product and services that are provided, and that what is being presented is followed up on and completed. It's also important that the salesperson gives reliable and accurate recommendations when selling a product. This helps build the perception of trust. And now, I'll pass it on to Danielle for the second half of Chapter 14.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'll be talking about the second half of Chapter 14. Handling customer complaints is another way to build trust and establish goodwill in a relationship. Salespeople should engage with unhappy customers and encourage them to explain their situation and what's making them unhappy. With that, the salespeople can implement a solution that will best fix the problem at hand. Another component of building long-term relationships is that both parties need to make full commitment from top to bottom, as well as have full communication. This way, the relationship can be integrated. However, sometimes long-term relationships don't work out and results in dissolution. This can happen because the salesperson doesn't monitor what the competitors are doing, how the industry is changing, and assuming that the business will always be theirs. Even if dissolution does happen, it is possible for a salesperson to win a company back. Overall, open communication, customer satisfaction, and trust are the most important attributes in a long-term partnering relationship.
Hi there. I will be covering Managing Your Time and Territory from Chapter 15. This chapter discussed many important topics, including time management, goal setting, and allocating resources. However, the most important topic for me personally was evaluating performance. Although I do not plan on having a job directly in sales following college, I still think this is a valuable tool to have. This tool can be used by evaluating your own performance along with your colleagues. There are 4 main parts to evaluating performance in sales. These are post-call analysis, activity analysis, performance analysis, and productivity analysis. The post-call analysis should analyze what parts of the sales call objectives were hit and missed. It is important to be taking notes during the sales call to help you in this analysis. Some of those notes that you could jot down could include the customer's purchase volume, key people in the decision-making process, and also different vendors that are already involved in the process besides yourself. Activity analysis aims towards assessing activities that have been conducted through the week. This assesses what goals were supposed to be accomplished and whether or not they were. This leads us to performance analysis. Here we analyze and evaluate the performance relative to the goals set earlier. It is important to look at how well each goal has performed, as well as how many were achieved. Lastly, we need to look at productivity analysis. This section introduced the conversion ratio to us, which is the number of sales made per call. These conversion ratios should be calculated based on account type and for each step of the sales cycle. Like I said earlier, I may not be going into sales, but this information will help me in my career path moving forward. My goal is to work within a professional sports organization and equipment department. This evaluation of performance will really help me out when it comes to the logistics behind road trips and also ordering new gear. Thanks for listening, and I'm going to pass it off to Sarah for Chapter 17.
Covering managing your career from Chapter 17. First, you have to understand your needs and what you have to offer. You have to know the skills you have as well as your knowledge and your qualities and traits that you possess. You have to understand the company's needs as well. Do you have the salesperson qualities, good communication skills, and are you self-motivated? And lastly, are you positive and do you have an enthusiastic attitude? In order to sell yourself, you need to create a resume, and there are two different types, conventional and functional, and you mostly just want to convey what you can do and your life history, your work experience, as well as what school you went to. In order to gain an interview, you not only have to apply, but you should use any personal contacts you have to get your foot in the door. You should also create a cover letter for each specific company, and you should start with an attention getter to set yourself apart. And in the body of your cover letter, you should have reasons why you should be hired specific to that company. And to close, you should have a request for action. If you don't ask for something, you won't get it. Once you have the interview, you should gain knowledge of the company because that's helpful for you and it also shows that you care. You should plan responses for common questions and use the STAR response. So you should have the situation you've been in, the task you had to do, the action you took, and then the results that came from what you did. You should also have some pre-planned questions to ask the interviewer at the end about the company or about the task because again, this just shows that you care and that you are interested in this job. You should dress professionally because small details matter, and you should also practice out loud with someone or in front of a mirror before. And finally, after the interview, you should send a follow-up thank you note, an email, or just a hard thank you letter. And don't be afraid to contact the company if you haven't been contacted by the date, just to figure out what's happening in the hiring process.